By default, the constant growth of technology means that every new console generation comes with scores of new contenders for the most technically impressive game of all time title. The 8th console generation was no different, with the PS4 and Xbox One era bringing us countless games that looked nothing less than spectacular. Some looked better than others though, and here we're going to be talking about the 30 games that stood out the most. There's a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in. Death Stranding. Hideo Kojima has always pushed the envelope where visuals in his games are concerned, and things did not change with his first release as an independent developer. Built on the Decima engine, Death Stranding was a proper graphical showcase. With the perfect blend of artistic vision and technical fidelity, Death Stranding brought its haunting world to life with great aplomb. Red Dead Redemption 2. Given the seemingly infinite manpower and resources Rockstar were able to throw at its development, it's no surprise that with Red Dead Redemption 2, they managed to develop what is probably among the most visually impressive games of all time. Red Dead Redemption 2 is absolutely gorgeous, from the tiny little details and cracks and crevices that no one would even notice, to the jaw-dropping vistas that populate its world. The fact that it manages to retain that level of polish and quality on such a consistent basis in spite of its massive size makes it that much more impressive. Metro Exodus. 4A Games went bigger than they ever have with Metro Exodus, adopting a semi-open world approach for their 3rd game in the series. But even though the game had a larger scope than its predecessors, it didn't lose that trademark visual sheen that defined them. If anything, it looks even better than they ever did. It brings the post-nuclear Russia's harsh and varied environments to life in truly stunning fashion, and especially on a high-end PC, it looks absolutely breathtaking. Gran Turismo Sport. Cutting-edge visuals and the racing sim genre often go hand in hand, for obvious reasons, and there was no shortage of games that exemplified that combination during the previous generation. Gran Turismo Sport was one of the finest such examples, bringing the genre closer to photorealism than ever at the time of its launch. GT Sport had no shortage of issues, especially at launch, but as far as visuals are concerned, the game was a complete and total success. Detroit Become Human. Simply by the virtue of being a very linear and focused title with mostly guided interactivity, Detroit Become Human manages to focus more on even the tiniest aspects of visual fidelity than most other games. The results, as anyone who's played the game will tell you, are impressive. Highly detailed character models, dense environments, and excellent animations are just a few of the many ways this game impresses its players on a technical level. Bloodborne. From Software's games have always had a very unique and distinct visual appeal, and while they generally put more of a focus on art than they do on tech, Bloodborne represents the finest balance the developer has ever struck between those two sides. The horrifying world of this modern classic is one that has seared itself into our brains, and that's not something that would have been possible if the game did not look as gorgeous as it consistently does. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Uncharted has always been the poster boy for console games with jaw-dropping visuals, so it's only fitting that Uncharted 4 is still one of the best-looking console games we've ever played, even 4 soon to be 5 years on from its release. It's stuffed full of tiny little details the way only a Naughty Dog game can be, and never ceases to amaze with its visual fidelity, from its first second to its very last. Forza Horizon 4. The Forza franchise never misses a beat with its visual accomplishments. That applies to both the Motorsport and Horizon branches, and Forza Horizon 4 is the zenith of the franchise in terms of visuals up until this point, as it is in so many other ways as well. A gorgeous and open world, vehicles that look spectacular on the inside and the outside, and an impressive attention to detail. Forza Horizon 4 checks all the boxes you would want it to, and then some. Batman Arkham Knight. Batman Arkham Knight has its issues in the gameplay department, and even on the technical side of things, its botched PC launch is hard to forget. But no one can deny that this is an absolutely gorgeous game. There's nothing quite like gliding through the dark, decrepit, rain-soaked streets of Gotham City as the Caped Crusader, and Rocksteady clearly poured their heart and soul into ensuring that that experience felt as authentic as it could. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales on the PS4 may not benefit from some key things that its PS5 version does, including the likes of ray tracing and improved performance, That doesn't mean it's a visual slouch. On the contrary, it's one of the finest looking games in the PS4's library. Whether it's Miles' silky smooth animations while he's swinging through New York, or the snow-covered streets of its recreation of Manhattan in December, or the level of detail exhibited in things such as character models and environments, Miles Morales is an impressive technical accomplishment from top to bottom. Mortal Kombat 11. Mortal Kombat 11 is yet another game that proves that NetherRealm Studios develop the most spectacular-looking fighting games in the industry. Its technical strengths are glaringly obvious and apparent even at a glance, but it's when you see the game in motion, with all of its flashy touches and flourishes, that it truly begins to shine. Those bright, vivid explosions of blood that Mortal Kombat lives and breathes for have never looked so morbidly beautiful. Gears 5. Gears 5 is easily one of the best-looking console games ever made. Statements like those always sound hyperbolic, but you only need to spend a short time with this game to see how true it is in this case. The Coalition deserve all the props in the world for creating this technical showpiece. Even on a base Xbox One, this game has the capacity to take your breath away. Meanwhile, on a high-end PC, and now on an Xbox Series X as well, it does that constantly. God of War 2018. There has never been a God of War game that, at the time of its launch, hasn't touched new heights in how good a game can look. A lot changed with God of War 2018, except for that one thing. The series' glorious return is a visual treat, and stands tall as a shining example of what a talented developer can do even with aging and frankly underpowered hardware. More than anything else, it makes us that much more excited about what SIE Santa Monica will be able to accomplish on the PlayStation 5. Ratchet & Clank 2016. Ratchet & Clank's 2016 remake is definitely the odd one out on this list. Unlike most other games we've spoken about, it doesn't go for photorealism. It has a very stylized and cartoonish look, but it bolsters that look with some seriously impressive tech. Insomniac's action platformer constantly displays a ridiculous level of sheen and polish, to the extent that it almost looks like a playable Pixar movie. Shadow of the Colossus 2018. Shadow of the Colossus is the kind of game that would look beautiful regardless of how technically impressive it was, thanks to its incredible art style and its desolately beautiful world. But of course, impressive technical accomplishments never hurt anybody, and Bluepoint Games really hit the ball out of the park in that area with its PS4 remake. Said desolate world comes to life in spectacular fashion in this remake, and best of all, it does so in a way that doesn't dampen the beauty of the game's art design, but actually enhances it. That's an incredibly hard balance to strike, but Shadow of the Colossus toes that line masterfully. Mafia Definitive Edition. Mafia as a series hasn't been able to touch the heights that its fans wanted to on a consistent basis, but under the guidance of Hangar 13, it has at the very least been a visual feast. Mafia Definitive Edition builds on the technical strengths of Mafia 3, and in doing so, it delivers one of the finest looking games in recent memory. With a gorgeous recreation of Lost Haven, impressive attention to detail, and superbly directed cutscenes, it stands proudly as an appropriately solid remake of the game that started the franchise. Resident Evil 2 2019. In 2017, with Resident Evil 7, Capcom debuted the RE engine, and the results in the visuals department were immediately stunning. A couple of years later, with the masterpiece that is the Resident Evil 2 remake, they ascended to even greater heights. Resident Evil 2 is a gorgeous game to behold, from its atmospheric lighting to its disgustingly detailed gore, from the disaster-stricken environments of Raccoon City to the detail on the decaying and shambling corpses of the zombies. This is a game that works overtime to make every nook and cranny look top-notch. The Order 1886. The Order 1886 will forever be known as a game that ultimately failed to live up to its potential. But for all of its issues, no one can ever accuse it of having bad graphics. Its alternative history steampunk London setting is one of the game's highlights, and its technically and artistically impressive visuals just breathe so much life into that setting. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. What the future holds for CD Projekt Red and their reputation in the industry remains to be seen, but no one will ever be able to rob them of everything that they accomplished with The Witcher 3. The open-world RPG is an all-time great in so many ways, and that's true for its visuals as well. From the bustling streets of Novigrad, to the snowy mountains of Skellige, to the swampy marshes of Velen, The Witcher 3 is a game that remains one of the best-looking open-world games we've ever played to this day. Drive Club. We've talked often about how visually impressive Drive Club is to this day, but there's a very good reason for it. The PS4 exclusive racing sim might not be the best game of its kind, but as far as visuals are concerned, it stands toe-to-toe with the best of the best this genre has to offer. The fact that it's one of the more visually impressive games on the PS4 in spite of having released all the way back in 2014 should tell you all you need to know about just how good it looks even now. Final Fantasy VII Remake. The final years of a console are a time when many developers manage to push the hardware to its absolute limits, and that's exactly what Square Enix did in 2020 with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Bringing this timeless classic to a modern audience with such an ambitious remake was a Herculean task, but Square Enix shouldered that responsibility like champions. What's most impressive about Final Fantasy VII Remake is that not only does it look stunning, it also does so while retaining the visual identity and essence of the original game. Control. Remedy Entertainment have always prided themselves on developing technically impressive games. They pushed themselves to the absolute limit with 2019's Control. On base consoles, the game looks gorgeous, though it suffered from major performance issues at launch. But it's on the PC that the game really shines. Especially with ray tracing enabled, the bizarre innards of the oldest house and everything that goes on in there looks unbelievable. Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn may have been completely different from anything Guerrilla Games had done in the past, but it still continued the tradition of the developer making graphical showcases. The open-world action RPG is yet another example of the perfect blend of evocative and beautiful art design, bolstered by best-in-class visual fidelity. The post-apocalypse has never looked this stunning. Cyberpunk 2077 PC. Cyberpunk 2077's technical issues on consoles have been the talk of the town over the last month or so, and we'd be fools to tell you that that game in its current state on the PS4 or Xbox One is one of the best-looking games of the previous generation. On the flip side, Cyberpunk 2077 on a good PC rig is absolutely one of the best-looking games of the previous generation. It's amazing to see just how much better Night City and the game as a whole look on more powerful hardware, especially with ray tracing enabled. Here's hoping CDPR can soon bring the game's console versions up to an acceptable level as well. Ghost of Tsushima. One look at Ghost of Tsushima is enough to tell you just how unbelievably spectacular the game looks, and the more you play, the more that belief will be reinforced. Sucker Punch's samurai epic might not have the hyper-realistic and ridiculously detailed visuals of something like, say, Red Dead 2, but other accomplishments, such as its excellent lighting model and incredible particle effects on top of the stunning art style, of course, ensure that Ghost of Tsushima still secures its place on this list with ease. The Last of Us Part 2. More than almost any other developer in the industry, Naughty Dog have a penchant for stuffing their games with tiny little details that most people wouldn't even catch, and most developers wouldn't deem important. And The Last of Us Part 2 represents them at their very best in that regard, among other ways. The overgrown and decrepit post-apocalyptic environments are full of obsessive details. Animations are the best we've ever seen in a game. And tiny little touches, like the tendrils of smoke coming off of a gun after you fire a shot, will never not be impressive. Devil May Cry 5. Capcom have put out multiple games over the past few years that can vie for the throne of best-looking console games, and Devil May Cry 5 is surely one of them. It bears all those telltale marks of quality that the RE engine enables, and the level of detail it exhibits on both a micro and macro scale never ceases to amaze. Even if you play the game on the underpowered Xbox One S, you'll still come away impressed with its graphics. Battlefield 5. DICE have always been one of EA's most technically proficient studios, and thanks to the impressive Frostbite engine, they've exhibited that proficiency time and again with their Battlefield games. They did so once again with Battlefield 5 in 2019. The World War II shooter leverages its technical accomplishments on a near-constant basis to deliver one of the most authentic and grounded FPS experiences we've played in recent memory. Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Unity's troubled launch is well documented, and that's something that will always be a stain on the game's reputation. But here's a plain and simple fact for you. This is still the best Assassin's Creed has ever looked. Arnaud's parkour animations are ridiculously detailed. The city of Paris is the most immersive and dense any Assassin's Creed setting has ever been. And over 6 years on from its launch, the game is now in a much more polished and stable state, so that players can actually enjoy its technical ambitions. Microsoft Flight Simulator. You knew this was going to be on the list. Sure, Microsoft Flight Simulator has the very distinct advantage of being a PC-exclusive release at launch, which means it wasn't being held back by older console hardware, but that obviously doesn't make it any less impressive. Earlier, we were marveling at how Red Dead Redemption 2 maintains its visual fidelity in spite of its massive open world. Well, Microsoft Flight Simulator takes that to ridiculous lengths. It's the closest a video game has ever come to photorealism, and we doubt it will be surpassed anytime soon. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.